James held the report card with a trembling hand, his eyes fixed on the large F that marked yet another defeat. It was hard to accept that, once again, he had failed. To him, that red letter seemed to scream, as if labeling him inadequate and without a future. But what no one knew was that this story was far from over. What was to come would be something even James could not believe was possible. His life was about to change in a way that no one could predict. And it would all begin with a simple yet powerful decision. Since he was a child, James had carried the weight of others' expectations and judgments. At school, he was always the one who fell behind, the problem boy, whom the teachers no longer knew how to help. While the other students celebrated their achievements, he hid behind his failures, feeling increasingly distant from a promising future. What he didn't realize was that within every failure lay a hidden opportunity, a chance to rise again and prove that he could be much more than people imagined. When he arrived home, James found his mother kneeling on the floor, diligently cleaning the floor of a house where she worked. She was exhausted, but did not let weakness show. When she looked at her son, she saw more than just a report card with poor grades. She saw potential. "James, you are not made to fail," she said, her voice firm, yet filled with love. That phrase resonated in the boy's heart, igniting a spark that until then had seemed extinguished. And it was there, in that moment, that he made the decision that would change his life forever. James's journey up to this point had been marked by pains and challenges that many would consider insurmountable. He grew up in poverty, witnessing his mother's sacrifices as she worked tirelessly to support the family. Her efforts were a constant reminder that he needed to fight for something greater, for a future that was different from the reality in which they lived. And although life had already given him countless reasons to give up, James was beginning to realize that perhaps it was in these struggles that he would find the strength necessary to transform his story. However, before achieving success, James would need to face his own demons. He knew the road would be long, and that change would not happen overnight. But with each new challenge, he would learn that persistence and faith were his greatest allies. The transformation of his life would not be quick or easy, but something within him told him he was destined for much more than people expected. And although no one could imagine it at that moment, James was about to become living proof that failure is just the beginning of an incredible story. His mother's words echoed inside him. Change did not come immediately. At first, he still felt lost and didn't know where to start. Failures continued to pop up, and the feeling of inadequacy was still constant. However, there was something different this time. James no longer wanted to be a victim of circumstances. He realized that he could, at the very least, try to do something different. Instead of spending hours in front of the television, he began to follow his mother's advice and spend more time with books. At first, reading felt burdensome, but over time, he discovered the transformative power of the stories he read. At school, the routine was challenging. Results did not improve overnight, and poor grades were still a part of his life. However, gradually, James began to notice subtle changes. He no longer felt so intimidated when raising his hand to ask a question. In a science class, when the teacher proposed a special project, James decided to participate, even knowing he could fail. It was his chance to prove himself, to show that despite his defeats, he had the capacity to overcome. But when the project didn't go as he had planned, frustration almost made him give up again. It was at that critical moment that James found unexpected support. The science teacher, who had seen many students give up at the first sign of failure, approached him and said something James would never forget. "You have potential, James. I see it, even if you don't see it yet." That phrase became a turning point for him. He decided then that no matter how many times he failed, he would keep trying. He started studying more intensely, spent hours in the library, and even asked for help from more experienced classmates. Little by little, he began to realize that each effort, no matter how small, was taking him in the right direction. As the months went by, the fruits of hard work began to show. His grades started to improve, and he began to gain confidence. So, something unexpected happened. James was called by the principal to receive an award for academic excellence. He had become the top student in science, an achievement he wouldn't have believed possible a year earlier. That trophy in his hands symbolized much more than an academic victory. It was proof that, with determination and perseverance, he could change the course of his story. And although there were many challenges ahead, James was determined to continue down the path that would lead him to success. With the award in hand, James felt he was finally on the right track, but he knew that the biggest challenges were yet to come. He had achieved an important victory, but the world outside school would demand even more determination. Years later, already in medical school, he faced extremely demanding exams and internships. At times it felt like the pressure was unbearable, and doubts began to creep back into his mind. He remembered the nights he stayed up late reviewing notes and questioning whether he truly had what it took to be a doctor. But whenever he thought about giving up, his mother's words returned with strength. "You can be whatever you want." The greatest test of his career came when James started his residency in neurosurgery. The hospital where he worked handled complex cases, and he often found himself faced with decisions that could change his patients' lives forever. One day, he was called to assist in an emergency surgery for a child with a severe brain injury. The case was delicate, and the risks were extremely high. James watched the experienced surgeons closely, absorbing every detail, but at the same time, he felt the pressure mounting, knowing that soon it would be him who had to make difficult decisions like that. The opportunity to demonstrate everything he had learned came sooner than he expected. During a shift, James was called to evaluate the case of a patient who had suffered a serious accident and was in critical condition. The surgery needed to be done urgently, but the senior doctors were busy with other operations. The circumstances required him to take the initiative, even knowing that a mistake could mean the end of his career. He took a deep breath, remembered his science teacher's advice, "You have potential, even if you don't see it yet," and decided that he wouldn't let fear stop him. With steady hands and a racing heart, James performed the surgery with all the skill and care he possessed. When the operation was over, the outcome was positive. The patient was in recovery and, against all odds, survived. James felt a mixture of relief and accomplishment that he had never experienced before. From that moment on, he knew he had gone through a turning point in his journey. He was no longer the boy who believed he was incapable, but rather a doctor who, despite the obstacles, proved himself able to face any challenge. This experience confirmed to him that the path he had chosen, filled with challenges and triumphs, was exactly what was shaping him to become not just a neurosurgeon, but an example of resilience and perseverance for everyone around him. The success of the surgery marked a turning point in James's life. After that day, he was seen with more respect and admiration at the hospital. Colleagues and mentors began to recognize his determination and skill, but for him, recognition was merely a consequence of hard work and the desire to help others. James knew that the journey to that point had not been easy, and that he would still face many challenges ahead, but he was no longer the insecure boy of the past. Each experience, each obstacle overcome, had shaped his strength and resilience, preparing him for even greater moments. Over the years, James continued to specialize, participating in increasingly complex and challenging surgeries. He became a reference in the field, especially in delicate cases that other doctors considered impossible. His journey, which had started with stumbles and failures, now inspired many other young doctors who, like him, had their own internal struggles to overcome. He remembered how lost and unmotivated he had felt in his youth, and this drove him to motivate his students and colleagues to never give up in the face of difficulties. James's impact was not limited to the walls of the hospital. He began to give lectures in schools and communities, sharing his story of overcoming and encouraging people to believe in their own potential. He knew that many young people, just as he once was, felt trapped by labels and negative expectations, and he wanted to show that the past does not define who we are, but rather the choices we make. With each talk, he saw the glimmer of hope in the eyes of those who listened to him. And this gave him the certainty that, despite all the challenges he would still face, his mission in life went far beyond medicine. James never forgot his mother's words. You can be whatever you want. These words had been the foundation of his transformation and continued to guide him on his journey. He understood that success was not a destination, but a continuous path of growth and overcoming. His life had become proof that, regardless of difficulties, everyone has within them the ability to change their own story. And with each surgery, each story told, and each young person encouraged not to give up, James continued to honor the promises he made to himself and to his mother, showing the world that it is indeed possible to be whatever one wants. James's story teaches us a powerful truth. Failure is not the end, but the beginning of something greater. Often we are led to believe that our difficulties and defeats define who we are. But as James proved, these are merely steps on a journey toward success. The road to that success is not easy. It is filled with challenges, doubts, and moments of discouragement. However, when we look beyond our failures and choose to persist, that is when we begin to realize the potential that has always been within us. Each stumble is a learning opportunity, and each small step brings us closer to realizing our dreams. James's journey reminds us that believing in oneself is the first step toward any great achievement. His mother's words, "You can be whatever you want," echoed in his life like a mantra that kept him from giving up when everything seemed lost. It is not just about talent or innate skills, but about the willingness to work hard, to get up after every fall, and to believe that we are capable of much more than we imagine. This faith in oneself is what transforms adversities into opportunities for growth. Another important point of this story is the impact that our choices have not only on our lives, but also on those around us. James could have given up at various moments, but his determination not only led him to success, but also inspired others to follow their own paths of overcoming. James's life is not just a story of personal victory. It is a living example of how persevering through difficulties can positively influence others. He proved that willpower, combined with the courage to face challenges, can change the world in ways we cannot even imagine. Just like James, we all face moments when we feel defeated or incapable. But his story reminds us that no matter how difficult the circumstances, the power to change is in our hands. If we have the courage to keep going, to fight for our dreams, to believe that we can be much more than what others or even we ourselves think, there are no limits to what we can achieve. The secret lies in not giving up, in persisting, even when the path seems impossible. Because in the end, you can be whatever you want, as long as you are willing to move forward, no matter how challenging the journey may be. If you've ever felt like James, facing setbacks and thinking about giving up, this story is for you. Remember, failure is not the end, but the beginning of an incredible journey. Don't let your difficulties define who you are. If you believe you can be whoever you want and are willing to fight for your dreams, then join us. Subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories that will reignite your hope and motivate you to keep going, even on the toughest days. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any new videos. You deserve to hear stories that change lives. Let's embark on this journey together.